GM, everyone's joining in. How are we feeling?
Good afternoon, good afternoon. Yeah, feeling pretty good after somebody tripped and hit the big red button yesterday on every single chart worldwide. But other than that, feel good. How are you, mate?
Doing great. Couldn't be better. Just a little less than 2.5 weeks till the conference. Counting down days. Endless things to do here at HQ, but we could not be more bullish. Super excited to bring everyone together. So many people, so many moving parts, but it's all coming together. It's all looking really awesome. Can't wait to have everyone on the space as well. We got a great lineup today.
Yeah, the lineup today.
Jedi.
The lineup today is going to be on fire. Very much looking forward to speaking to some of the biggest game industry nerds out there. It's going to be a lot of fun, myself included.
Yes, I'm sure we have plenty of gamers joining us today. Should be super cool. We're going to be chatting about just gaming's impact within Web3. You know, how NFTs, metaverse, and sort of Web3 ownership will play into the gaming landscape. Different games being built on blockchains, with blockchain, and what's possible. Really, we have some really awesome speakers. We have two incredible presenting sponsors as well. So Resurgence Games here, going to be one of our speakers at Zebu Live, as well as one of our sponsors alongside Pluto Digital, incredible VC who's supporting us. And we also have Spark World, should be joining here in a minute, but they are another one of our incredible sponsors. I'm obviously going to let them introduce themselves as well. But yeah, just buzzing. Can't wait to bring everyone to Zebu Live. Have a great time. Hear from some incredible speakers, and just enjoy Web3 and the people that are building it.
Hey Ashton, it's good to be on. Thanks for having us. And I think you already posed the question in terms of Web3 and the dynamic that exists with gaming. And I think what we should do is just keep quiet and let the panel answer that question for the rest of the afternoon. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty keen on that. We've got some very big. I think all the questions, like some of the speakers might have seen some of them. Every single question is almost like a topic in its own, because what's interesting about the GameFi space is there's so many like moving different elements in it, and it doesn't actually just have to be like a video game. There's Okay, I'm going to shut up for now, but when we do get in, we can really knuckle down on it.
For sure. I think we just have one or two more speakers coming up. We pretty much get started. I'll just give a quick debrief, quick intro for those that don't already know. I'm sure most people should at this point know about Zebu Live coming up in, as I said, just over 2 weeks' time. We have over 150 speakers now, which is crazy. Continuing to just add more firepower to the agenda. The final agenda is being confirmed this week. We already have it sort of 99% the way there on the site, so you can actually go and see that today. So you can go check out day one schedule, day two schedule, main stage, alpha stage, all the different things that are happening. It's an exciting thing that we're having live this week, of course. Also, for anyone that doesn't know, it's going to be 2 days. We have over 40 sessions streaming from Web3 in general to gaming, metaverse, DAOs, DeFi, crypto, and really the whole sort of Web3 landscape. It's going to be super exciting, hoping to connect sort of the London, UK scene, along with the international crowd coming in as well. And we're, just really excited to put on a great show. We're going to be having some after parties, some side events coming together, as well as really just some awesome people and awesome brands supporting the event. So with that, make sure you get your tickets if you haven't yet. Flying off the shelves, looking like here pretty soon we're going to sell out. So you heard it here first. Get them while you still can. Get them while they're hot. And that's pretty much it from me. Obviously, really exciting space today. Some really great speakers, as you mentioned, and I'll leave it up to them to sort of introduce themselves and get the show on the road. Thank you so much again to Blockmates, who are our co-hosts today. We have Dan here, and we also have Jedi, who I'm sure will introduce his real name if he wishes as well. And We also have an exciting announcement coming up here pretty soon, getting a press release about our headline sponsor, actually, which will be a company called Dancing Seahorse. More on that to come, but it's going to be the title sponsor of the event. Cannot be more excited to have this growing brand be supporting us this year and being a main sponsor. So yeah, with that, I'll hand it over. Thanks so much, everyone. Ashton from Zebu Live reporting to you.
Awesome, thanks so much, Ashton. Hey guys, my name's Dan. I'm part of the Blockmates team. I'm gonna be one of your co-hosts today with my good friend and co-host Jedi. Jedi, I believe is his real name. I've never seen the man, the mystery. But no, so my name's Dan. Work with Blockmates. Quick bit of history about me. I used to be a performance coach for about 15 years, and then I moved into head of sales, doing sales pretty much all around Asia, from Hong Kong, Singapore, and I did have like a little stint over in Australia, which is pretty cool. Kind of going to crypto because it looked cool, and I think it's the only space in the world where you can have these crazy weird names and have crazy ideas and generally just make them come to life. Always been a gamer, OG RuneScaper, OG World of Warcrafter, OG Call of Duty player as well. So to get to speak to everybody today, I'm extremely excited because I am fairly confident there is going to be at least one World of Warcrafter here today, like there was in last week's session. That's a quick introduction to myself, Jedi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Local time. I'm from Cape Town. My name is Jedi. Well, not really. But also OG gamer. I've been gaming way too long. I was there when Space Invaders was wheeled into the cafe. So yes, I'm probably one of the oldest people here. I'm very excited to obviously be chatting to you guys, about the space. Gaming has always been, kind of like the thing that pushes the envelope, not only from hardware, but obviously from a software perspective. And now we're seeing it in crypto. I'm of the opinion that mass adoption in crypto and particularly blockchain will happen through gaming. And I believe that a lot of you who are here on this panel today are going to be instrumental in that process. Obviously if what I'm saying becomes reality, then, like there's that age-old saying in crypto, even though it's not that old, is that crypto will become a part of mass adoption when people are using it and they don't realize that they are. And I think gaming is that, that ticket to that mass adoption that, we all have been expecting and are patiently waiting for. So yeah, super excited to be co-hosting this. And why don't we kick it off with the general question? And I think it's open to the floor. And the general question is, why Web3 versus Web2 from a gaming perspective? And I'd like to kind of dive into this question with the panel and maybe get, hopefully, as many of you to answer this question as possible.
I don't know who wants to go first. It's Ian.
I'll jump in. Hello, everyone. I'm Mohammed. I'm the head of tokenomics at Animoca Brands. Thank you guys for having me. Looking forward to also speaking at the Zebu event later on this month in London. I guess why Web2 versus Web3? I mean, fundamentally, it comes down to one thing, which is ownership. It's being able to own your assets. We've seen just throughout history, or more so, again, we've seen from early games where when you're on your private server and you're able to trade your in-game assets and have an economy around that. That's amazing. It's great, and it brings a lot more gamers into an ecosystem and where there's that sense of community. But the other side of it, we also see something with like FIFA, where every year you need to buy a new game, and all of your progress in the previous game is lost, and all of your cards and your plays that you've purchased or you've won, you can't carry over. There is no interoperability from that sense. So it's like how can I put it? It's a one-way stream where money gets taken, time gets taken, and that's it. And at best, you're top of a leaderboard, or you win a competition in the game. And that's sort of what we've seen from Web2. If it was pay to play and then free to play. But in terms of Web3 games, and I hate saying Web3 games because a game should be a game regardless of what's on the back end. But so I'll rephrase that: games with Web3 or blockchain on the back end. For me, it's a natural evolutionary step, because all of a sudden we talk about Web 1 being read, Web 2 being read write, Web 3 being read write and own. A lot of people don't understand the need for ownership because they've been stuck in a Web 2 mindset. But what we're seeing with games, and especially now that we're seeing a lot more actual games that people want to play being developed or starting to come out. For example, Phantom Galaxies is one of the first AAA games with Web3 or blockchain on the back end. That's a game conventional gamers want to play. And then it's once they come into an ecosystem wanting to play a game, when they realize I have ownership of my assets, I can actually take an asset out of the ecosystem and trade that asset. It's super important. I think what we've done wrong so far is this idea of play to earn. No one plays to earn. We play the two main reasons: number one, for fun, and number two, we play for the community. And that still has to be the narrative when we're developing games in Web3.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear, mate. How are you?
Great. Sorry for taking longer to come to the spaces. My name is Andre. Great to be here. So jumping to this question as well, I think it always happened in games that people even sold in-game assets. For example, we can take a look at like RuneScape or FIFA coins. There is like a side economy to the game. So people would sell like in-game items for fiat, basically. And also blockchain allows those transactions to be safer because it's not directly P2P. So if I wanted to sell like RuneScape coins, for example, it will be risky for the user, and it goes against the guidelines of the game. And with the blockchain, that becomes possible, and a whole new economy happens in the game in an infrastructure way that I think it's way better for the user. And also, for example, in the past, personally, I played some games that you had to buy in-game items, and all that investment just stay there. And if the game, it gets stuck inside the game, and it gets quite hard to like move your assets or all of the social behaviors that an economy has, because like money is a social way to represent yourself, and I think it's quite an important part of games. You see a lot of economies inside the games, and it's nice that we have now tokens in the technology to really represent that in a more meaningful way.
Everyone, it's John here from Playing, but I think great points. I think the thing I'd add is this. I think there isn't this one-size-fits-all gaming audience, right? And I think each gaming genre, and I spent a lot of time working in mobile games, so the motivations of a casual gamer are very different to a hyper-casual gamer, very different to like an RPG gamer, and even within casual, you've got racing games, skill-based games, and the motivations of those players are different. So I think it's really important that we design like amazing Web3 experiences in the environment that these players are most comfortable, which is mobile, and genuinely believe that the next wave of Web3 mass adoption is going to be driven by mobile. But I think it's super exciting to see now these teams that have spent a lot of time in Web2 and really understand these audiences starting to architect like gaming experiences specifically built for these audiences. That the most important thing is fun, right? We all play games to have fun, and showing them outside of ownership how you can actually have more fun with a blockchain-enabled mobile game than just playing a game normally. And I think that's why we all make games, is because we love playing games and we love making fun. So I think that's going to be a really important thing that we need to start proving and showing players. That I totally agree that asset ownership and interoperability and being able to move assets around is a big plus in terms of blockchain. But I think it's down to us as builders to really educate the audience that we're building for. So for us, it's mass casual gamers, right? They're not crypto natives. They don't really know much about tokens. They've got no clue what tokenomics is, or an exchange. Maybe they know Bitcoin, but really all they care about is, okay, how can you make the game that I've been playing for the past year more fun and give me a direct benefit? So I think it's going to be super interesting to see over the next 6-12 months the motivations for players. Is it play and own? Is it play and reward? Is it play and compete? Or is it just play? And I think it's going to be super fun to figure this out together.
I was just going to jump in and support that. I'm Ian Hambleton. I'm CEO at Emergent Games. We make Resurgence, which is a AAA MMO RPG. I agree with loads of what's just been said by the other panelists. The core thing is that games have got to be fun. And up to now, Web3 games have not been good enough, but I see that trend changing. So that has to be a primary driver. We look at Web3 as a natural evolution in gaming from what's come before. So from DLC to freemium to free to play. And it builds on a trend that's been happening for a while where players are trying to have some decentralized ownership. So, you know, for the past 5 years, PlayStation have been getting complaints from players who've been building up accounts and selling them on PayPal. And blockchain is going to legitimize that whole behavior of getting some sort of reward from playing and then being able to sell that and have some ownership. And I think that, like, you know, one of the reasons everyone's so bullish about gaming and Web3 is it's a natural place where people can see utility of NFTs and use things. But I think we're so early in the journey of even understanding what blockchain can bring to gaming. A kind of out there example is in Web2, trophies are a massive thing for gamers. But through the blockchain, we can build in things so that people have a ledger of who was the first person to ever hold that sword, who was the first person to ever win that trophy in games. Now, that's not really about selling things and having ownership, but it is a very special characteristic that gamers will love.
Yeah, I actually massively agree with you there. And you just got me thinking that, you know, when you used to play World of Warcraft and you get a new expansion, and there was always like a world first to take down that big boss that's just come out with the expansion everybody's been raiding for. So creating like a ledger or some kind of like, how do you say, like memoir of how things go would be pretty awesome. But one thing I'd be interested, especially if it's going down the route of like mobile gaming, like how would you make, let's say, Candy Crush like Web3, and so my mum could understand it and like have fun whilst playing it? Like how do we blend over into that kind of market?
Look, I was given that as a bit of an out there example of stuff you can do with blockchain that's amazing, and we haven't even started to even fathom all the amazing things we can do there. I agree with something that one of the early panelists said, which is that Web3 games will be great when people don't know it's crypto and they are just using it, enjoying it and benefiting from decentralization. So the mum example of Candy Crush will get solved when she's just playing it and then occasionally realizing there's some benefits. Our approach on that is like, make it free to play, make it a completely frictionless account. One of the worst things about Web3 at the moment is the barriers to entry and all the difficult usability things. So for us, our approach is really like trying to think about that open funnel and making it really completely frictionless.
Hey guys, just gonna jump in here before I blend into the background. I'm Brennan, the co-founder of Avocado Guild. A little bit about us, for those that don't know, and for others that I see in the panel listening in, thank you for supporting. Avocado Guild was the largest Web3 gaming guild of 2021. We started in June of 2021, and by the end of the year, we actually surpassed over 10.7 thousand scholars. Basically, new generation Web3 gamers that was introduced to this Web3 crypto technology, how it can be implemented into games. Obviously, at the time, Axie Infinity was very dominant, and all of our scholars actually played Axie Infinity, but many of them played other games as well. As the GameFi space kind of evolves, it's important to highlight how early we really are, and I know this has been addressed by many of the panelist speakers. And also to bring back to what Chadman was saying before, about your mum, getting her to understand Candy Crush. I think that's very important, but what's more important is that there's a new generation growing up these days that has embraced this technology. I speak to a lot of game developers, and they tell me about their children asking them for money to buy NFTs. They're creating content, making still frame shots of animations on their phones. This is the new generation that we're trying to cater for. The technology that exists now, back in 2017 when I first looked at it, I was a non-believer. I looked at it and I thought it has no function. I don't know what it's going to do. But as we progressed, I realized it was here to actually bridge a problem. And this technology is not going away. Governments are looking at it. People from every country is looking at it. The rich are looking at it as a means of making them richer. The poor is looking at it perspective of using this technology to bridge some of the support and just to change their lives. When we understand that the new generation is growing up embracing this technology, we can then really understand what we can build on top of it. Now, to 2017, the technology has moved leaps and bounds. Heaps of money has come into the space. A lot of people have invested in GameFi projects, and yes, many of them hasn't done well. But we need to understand that for 2021 till now, really it's only been 1 year, and actually dominated that whole time. In terms of variety of games being offered, variance in tokenomics, genres of different games, none of that was really available, guys. To make a proper game, to make a game like World of Warcraft, by the way, I was a World of Warcraft guild master from 2005. Vanilla World of Warcraft, we're 200 people in our guild, and we were the first in our server to slay Ragnaros, basically, when Molten Core came out. For a really good quality AAA game to come out, it's not something people can churn in a year. It's not as simple as slapping Web3 on top of a technology. It's understanding what Web3 is. It's a technology. It's an ingredient that we can use to empower the gaming experience. You can use this to build on-chain credentials for every single gamer, or you can use this to facilitate transparent transactions. But in the end of the day, it's something extra. It's not to change the idea that games themselves should not be providing entertainment value as primary offerings. So I'm not saying that these games will take away all the gamers from Web 2 or casual gaming. I think all these genres can exist, just like how they exist right now, just like how competitive PC gamers dislike everyone that's better than them and call everyone that's worse than them noobs, and just like how console gamers coexist and casual players that like to play Candy Crush can also enjoy that on their mobiles. I see Web3 as providing an opportunity for indie developers to develop something that, you know, traditionally is owned completely by Steam. And also, I just came back from Korea Blockchain Week. When I look at all of these other large-scale Web2 companies, the leaders of games in the world, how much attention they're focused on Web3, it's very promising when we start to kind of understand what the future might be offering. Sorry about that, guys.
All right, if I can jump in as among the latest ones, I'm Alexander, CEO, founder of Unique Network. It's an NFT chain on Polkadot. Wanted to follow up actually on what you were saying about the evolving the nature of gaming. Actually, coming back to most comments on economics and and ownership changes that Web3 brings compared to Web 2. There's one more component that actually Web3 can bring very efficiently, and that is community building. When you think about it, the Web2 games are very oriented towards, very centralized setups where, the developer owns the stuff and sells them, and mostly to people who play them individually. Yet games are supposed to be a collective thing. You play games with all, and that gives much bigger satisfaction. And I think that the combination of things that Web3 can bring will actually open up the space for Web3 games to grow. It's no wonder that Xfinity kind of was the first to kind of really explode because in demand, because it was economical kind of pyramid scheme or whatever, but it was fun for people because of economics. But what we need to do is go beyond the economics and nurture not only the fun part but the community part. So games that go in that direction and that can leverage the Web3's kind of fan management things, user-generated content, like what the Sandbox is doing. They have ability for anybody to create assets in games, some advanced ones. Yes, it's tied to economics, but economics is only one part of the thing. It's getting recognition, as you said lastly, and getting a reputation there, and actually building a community or playing just with friends. There's a lot of things in Web3 that enrich that experience and that enable a lot of experimentation that I hope will become actually mainstream in a few years.
I'll jump in here as well, I guess, guys. I took out somebody else before I faded into the background, I guess. So yeah, I'm Robbie. I'm a co-founder of Chain Guardians. I think we were one of the earliest blockchain gaming projects to actually surface in and around 2018. So we're certainly one of the earlier ones, and we focused on essentially gamifying the blockchain space by creating what we call blockchain superheroes for different chains. A large part of our thesis was to essentially encourage users and players to actually engage with meaningful blockchain technology. So we created a character which utilised Chainlink's verifiable randomness functionality. We was one of the first, or if not the first, to put an NFT on Matic AlphaNet back in sort of like early 2019, working closely there, and encouraged users to essentially bridge their NFTs from ETH to Matic Polygon, in order to gain additional power-ups in an RPG that we were creating. And the idea was that each of these superheroes was the personification of their blockchain, so the values and the community kind of reflection which occurred there. And I think, from our perspective, we were essentially looking at trying to encourage adoption and also to educate on the technology, via basically meaningful integrations. And I think a lot of what has been said here, all the way back to when Jedi mentioned blockchain gaming's role in education and adoption of crypto in general, Web3, blockchain technology, it is something that we have very much believed and very much agree with, all the way through to kind of provable ownership, which was mentioned specifically by our friend Manimoka there, all the way through to interoperability, as well as the barriers to entry that it was referenced by the gentleman from Resurgence. I think that there's quite clearly a very wide acknowledgement and acceptance amongst developers around some of the kind of I would say the benefits of blockchain gaming, but also some of the barriers. There's a metric in particular around time to fun, which has been kind of referenced here a couple of times. And this comes down to UI UX and the fact that there still very much is a lot of requirements on users to understand economy, which was mentioned here, and B, have a decentralized wallet access, and all of these kind of different barriers that can essentially basically slow down people's time to fun, which is the ultimate kind of one of the most important performance measures for traditional gaming, Web2 gaming, that for the most part we haven't got particularly right in Web3, and that's obviously as a result of challenges of centralization and decentralization, and typically something that's more easy to use from a UX perspective is probably more centralized, because you've always got that additional kind of requirement on the user to verify ownership or authenticity, or authenticate their sign, whatever it may be. So I guess really, all as I'm trying to iterate here is that I think every point that has been made here is a poignant one, but what I would underline with is that I think that it's actually the balance of all of the aforementioned that has followed, is that the challenge for the developers is that we're actually trying to achieve that kind of beautiful balance as an industry conscience between having the right UI UX but not actually over centralizing it, having the right economy and encouraging players to actually engage with provable ownership and their ability to kind of transfer assets and realize value, but without overemphasizing it and still focusing on the kind of quality of the games that a user will play, all the way through to actually educating users on the importance of the blockchain technology, but not actually making it so ingrained that it actually destroys the fun and the enjoyment of the game. So there's a huge amount of challenges, but it's also extremely exciting, I think, for everybody that is a developer in the space, but equally the potential possibilities that it can open up for the actual gamers themselves.
I think that the adoption of the technology and the development of GameFi Web3 will take time. I like everyone's approach on, and this is consistent with many of the games that we speak with in Asia or in the US. I like everyone's approach in wanting to reduce the level of friction that users experience to help onboard and encourage this adoption. However, I think things kind of happen in stages as well. Right now, that is extremely important because we need more users in the space. And obviously, it's vital that these games are actually able to be fun to play. Otherwise, people are there for all the other reasons that are non-sustainable. But as we develop, I think it's important to also highlight that, we do need to recognize blockchain, the technology. We can't integrate too much of it to the point where it really is Ready Player One, although I would love to live in that kind of universe. I think development takes time. And maybe people need to be kind of spoon-fed a little bit for now. But once we realize what the technology can allow, and then we build games around that concept, then I think we can start seeing the landscape get filled up with the genre of different games that have much more to offer for people that are diehard Web3 fans, and for those that do find a lot of value in being able to own their digital footprint via the blockchain. And as a guild, we started off providing access to a lot of scholars who didn't have the money to kind of get started in this technology. And at the time, it was very rewarding for a lot of these scholars. They were able to make money during times of COVID, and it helped them actually onboard into this technology as the first generation or 1.5 generation Web3 users. But as the landscape kind of progresses, and we are aware that many more Web2 games developers are now looking at this space, people are leaving Blizzard, leaving Square Enix to kind of start their own projects and tackle the space. As a guild, we do have a lot of information, patterns and trends of the first generation users, and we are more than happy to share this information with a lot of game developers to help the ecosystem as a whole develop games that may work. I think what we would love to see is more innovation in not just the game development, but obviously in the tokenomics design, or even Phantom Galaxy, which we speak to fairly often actually, around imbuing the tokens within the NFTs. Like, all of these are very unique approaches that can be done because of this technology that we have now. And it'll be very exciting to see in the next 6 or 12 months, what else might be coming into this space, what else we can be expecting.
Brendan, if I may ask, just in terms of your exposure and your discussions with the Web2 types, especially like your big players like Electronic Arts and especially Blizzard, what is their perspective around ownership? Because obviously, as we all know, it's always been a contentious issue. RMT and the trade of accounts and the rest of it has always been very much taboo. And, with bans and, obviously, employing a large number of people to enforce these policies. I mean, is that something that's going to change? Or is it just, it's business as usual and we're not really considering the Web3 aspect?
Thank you for this question. I think it's wonderful. First of all, I haven't actually spoken directly with Square Enix or Blizzard. I did come back recently from Korea Blockchain Week, and I spoke to all of the large Korean developers, or the ends. I can't really name who in particular. But I can say that a lot of these guys are very keen on coming into Web3. However, their approach to Web3 is still skewed towards more closed-loop ecosystems. They haven't quite embraced the concept of Web3 complete interoperability and user-owned content to a point where we can bring it into different ecosystems. However, I still think this is a very good move forward for the industry as a whole, knowing that there are people willing to dedicate resources to kind of tackle the problem and understand that this technology is the future. Whether the V1s or whatever they release will have sustainability and make as much money as they make in Web2, I don't know. I can't answer that question. But I do know that as more money pours into the space and more developers that have hundreds of game developers come in and think, how are we going to build something that lasts? I think that's very good for the development of this barren ecosystem at the moment. And I refer to the barrenness as in the barrenness of GameFi when you look at what's really being offered. There's a lot of promises on what will come, and I'm sure that will be very exciting. We are definitely looking forward to it. But for what's available now, there really isn't that much. I think a lot of the larger companies, and I really can't speak for them, but as a guess, I would say they're waiting for someone to solve the equation first. For example, with the amount of money Diablo made in Web2, it wouldn't really make sense for them to kind of spend hundreds of millions of dollars to tackle Web3 while no one else has solved the problem. For them to kind of tackle the ecosystem after someone has come up with a formula, that makes a lot more sense, and I think that's a much safer approach for a lot of these guys. But having that said, I'm still talking to the big guys in Asia that are very, very interested in coming in, and I've heard a lot of rumors about a lot of Japanese game developers, the really big ones, really eyeing this space and thinking what they can build as well.
Just to kind of maybe jump in here slightly, in terms of some of those really kind of large, proprietary ecosystems and the large companies or corporations, game producers, whatever you want to call them, they are definitely actively investing in projects that are already have decentralized ecosystems and NFTs, so there is definitely an appetite there. I think so in terms of, I think Brendan was referring to someone, obviously I think many people are probably like a little bit reluctant to talk about exactly who they've spoken to, but without a doubt the names that have been mentioned here, have definitely got strong interest. There is an appetite for it. but make no doubt that I would suggest that most of these companies will go where the money is. So if there's enough money there, then they will be motivated to go there. In terms of their intent towards altruism, it's empowering communities and individuals at the consumer level. If it makes sense and it will make them money, then yes, they will do it. But I would question whether or not their agenda would be towards maybe what some of the more philanthropical ideologies are behind Web3 and decentralization, which kind of accounts to what Brendan was suggesting about the fact that they're still more in favour of closed ecosystems. And I think that's all well and great. We've got a massive brand name coming in. Just using this as an example, but then they have a closed ecosystem, and then you have an issue with regards to 51% attacks that occurred with AXA, right? It's a closed ecosystem. Effectively, everything, majority of it's centralized, and therefore you had a huge hack. And these are the risks that these big brands may actually present to consumers if they're not fully aware of how the technology works. So there has to be a process of education there. But more importantly, any users that follow them into the Web3 space may have a forever tainting view on what Web3 is if they experience such an event occur. So I think that obviously the potential to do good for gaming in general as an industry and the consumers is absolutely humongous, but therefore so are the risks. And I think that as people, as developers who are in the space and speaking with these brands, as I have also had conversations with several, it's really important that we actually kind of educate them on the associated risks as well. Because otherwise, it could potentially destroy the space completely if we're not cautious.
Robbie, sorry, just a really quick one to address that. I do agree with everything you're saying, but I want to highlight, as much as there are risks, I see a lot of opportunities in Web3 as well. Like, Web3 allows many indie game studios to really create something that's absolutely different. And it gives them an audience, it gives them an opportunity to raise from crowds, it gives them a chance that they wouldn't have in Web2 as they fight against the blizzards. And when these large companies come in, perhaps, yes, they'll approach it differently, where when money comes in, they'll chase the money. But regardless, they bring so many eyeballs with them, and these eyeballs can also possibly convert to become Web3 users. They bring credibility, they bring eyeballs, just like how we're seeing a lot more money being poured into Web3 these days, especially in GameFi. When you talk to a lot of the institutional investors into the space, if you start talking to banks and things, it's funnily enough that they always still look for some middleman that's there to kind of underwrite most of their investments, and that may not exist because we want to work with everything via smart contracts. I don't know what the final version will look like, but as part of development, some things will work and most things will fail. But we can be sure that, by version 3 or 4, things generally get a bit better. And it's very exciting to be able to put ownership back in the hands of the community themselves. I'm not saying that I completely endorse what these large companies are doing, but I do see benefits that they could perhaps bring into this space as well. And I see the space having already brought so many opportunities to other developers that otherwise wouldn't have had a chance.
Yeah, I think Brendan's said what I was going to say. I was just going to take it more from a corporate governance. I think, don't forget, these companies are multi-billion-dollar publicly listed companies, and having worked for some of them, you just simply, they're not allowed to take the kind of risks, and they're waiting on some of this space to settle out. Some compliance, regulation issues. So I agree with Brendan. It's a massive opportunity, because what will happen is once this space matures and a lot of this regulation is in place, then it's just like happened in the early days of free-to-play gaming. In a few years' time, these big publicly listed games companies will come in and go and acquire some of these amazing innovators that are building, testing right now, because that's just the way business works. And I know a lot of them are, just quietly watching. They've even made some small investments in some of these teams. But that's the way I think this space is going to move. But totally agree with Brendan, is right now there's so much opportunity. And I think the other exciting thing is the number of people that are leaving, like EA, Kabam, and spinning up their own Web3 studios. What like Gabe Layden is doing, the ex-Machine Zone CEO, an absolute trailblazer in free-to-play games, and has just raised $200 million for Limit Break. I think that's the other massive trend we're seeing now, is a lot of people that have the freedom to do it in a publicly listed company, but are just quitting and doing it themselves. I think they're also ones to watch that are going to bring so much innovation and thinking from, you know, established free-to-play principles and game economies, and then also bringing in some just more Web3 natives that think differently, fusing together those brains and just making some amazing games.
So I guess, you know, there's no kind of, I don't think there's a difference of opinion in terms of the potential benefits of these large corporations becoming involved in Web3. Lots to mention there in terms of, you know, the adoption side of things, bringing users without a doubt. So there's, you know, I completely understand and I see and I completely agree that there is without a doubt, you know, a positive counterbalance to these brands paying attention to the space and of course becoming involved. I just think that it's a case of making sure that the brands that are entering the space are aware of the associated risks behind some of their decisions with respect to the potential damage it can do to the industry reputation and also their consumers. And I think that's the only point really that I'm trying to you know, kind of put across, I would say.
You know, when I speak to a lot of games, whether they're large or small, one really critical part of what we do is, I actually provide a lot of advisory, and I don't ask for tokens and all this in return. I provide that advisory, that transparent game space knowledge, everything that, you know, I've spent the last 14, 15 months grinding my ass out to kind of learn. I share this knowledge with them because I think that as a builder, what's more important than removing that fog of war so people can actually see what the users are experiencing, what other people are doing, and what the current population of Web3 gamers kind of want. So I do share this with them, and I do encourage better development of tokenomics. Mohammed, I think we met in New York very briefly. Love what Anima is doing. And in order to build a better space, everyone kind of does need to work together. And unfortunately, some will fail, some will lose money, but, you know, it's for the right cause and things will improve in the long run. So, I mean, everyone's here for the same reason, because of the opportunities that Web3 can bring, and we genuinely believe that GameFi, that gaming itself can be a catalyst. And what we've seen, it's been highlighted throughout this conversation that it's still very early.
Yeah, I agree. I think the likes of Animoca's, you know, and I've actually not met Mohammed before, but we are a portfolio company of Animoca. I've spent time speaking with Yat and James quite a few times. They also purchased land from Cryptoverse, which is one of our other sister projects. So we have a great relationship with Animoca, and I think that for the likes of Animoca in particular, their role is actually pivotal and key, because without doubt they are the kind of the global name across GameFi, I would say, which, you know, a lot of the principal kind of Web2 projects and large institutions will be without a doubt basically looking to engage with them and lean on their expertise, because they're the ones that have been around the longest. I mean, you know, they were one of the biggest names back when GameFi was just a kind of a real infant in 2017 when I became involved. So I'd be really keen to hear Hamid's take on brands and bigger some of the big kind of studios that are now turning their attentions to Web3 as well.
Yeah, I think some excellent points were raised throughout, and I think this is it. And I know this was mentioned. We need to be building games that we playing first and foremost. It is about the games, and with a lot of the game studios. Actually, I guess an interesting fact: some of the game studios don't want to be mentioned within a web of the same sentence as Web3 or blockchain, because they're scared it will scare away potential game players and users, and they want to appeal outright to the Web2 users. And then we've got on the other end of the spectrum, we've got game studios similar to Starfish and Phantom Galaxies, where we're full on Web3. Everything we're doing is Web3 based, but it's still an amazing game to play. So I don't think that we've settled on a formula for success, but it's more so about the appetite for each different game studio in terms of how Web3 in inverted commas that they want to appear to be. And it goes back to my earlier point about, well, games have to be games. It's not. No one says I'm playing a free to play game, or I'm playing a pay to play game, or I'm playing a blockchain game. I'm playing a game, and it's that has to be the main selling point for a lot of these game studios is, well, the front end is the same. The front end doesn't change. The user experience has to be seamless, even if blockchain is on the back end. And then for me, that's where mass adoption starts to come, is when you're bringing people in step by step from what they know. I mean, what we spoke, I know was mentioned earlier about just how difficult it is to set up a wallet. and the amount of friction that exists just to come into the Web3 ecosystem. And for gamers, that most of these guys or girls are not going to go through that. I want to be able to start up a game and play. If it's I'm popping a disc into a console, I'm not sure who does that anymore. If I'm loading up an app on my phone, and back to the Candy Crush and the mum, like if someone's mum playing Candy Crush, for her that user experience has to be seamless. It might be that, oh, I've got some of these extra power-ups that I can now sell. Oh wait, I can sell these. How come this power-up is worth more? And then curiosity is peaked, and it's through this intrinsic/extrinsic motivation. It's right now we're asking people to go and set up a wallet and to go through all of these difficulties to be able to come into the GameFi ecosystem, and that acts as a bottleneck, and is why we haven't seen adoption. Whereas if I'm going into the App Store or the Play Store and I'm downloading an app, or I'm on Steam and I'm downloading a game and I have no idea the backend is Web3 and I'm playing this game because people are enjoying playing this game. And then on that journey, I then discover that this digital asset is actually an NFT and it's actually worth something. And I can then rent this out, or I can sell this on the secondary market, or I can continue to play with it. And we start to empower people. And then that motivation becomes intrinsic for them to want to learn more about Web3, as opposed to you have to do this. So I think there's a lot going on. I agree. Personally, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more adoption maybe in the next 18 to 24 months, purely because what's being built. And again, it's not just us. I know we're one of the leaders, but there's a lot out there, and there's a lot being built to a high quality that when these games or these platforms start to hit the market, and people start to adopt and play these games, and communities start to grow, then we slowly start to see adoption. And that, it's not just GameFi. And I know when DeFi came out, I was like, this is going to be it. This is going to be mainstream adoption, and it wasn't. And then I had the same buzz with GameFi. But what I'm seeing is every vertical, every industry in the space right now is looking at blockchain, is looking at Web3, and it's just a matter of time. There is going to be an inflection point at some point in the next few years, and from that inflection point where everyone is using an app or a platform with Web3 in the back end, then for me, it's within 12 months we have mainstream adoption. And I'm not sure if that answered the question, but I know there's quite a bit in there.
And can I add to that, Robbie? You will be happy to hear that people are working on those solutions. We at Unique have built a sponsoring palette, for example, that any DApp game can use to sponsor transaction fees. So you can actually take what you've seen at NBA Top Shots, the way they have sneakily kind of hidden the blockchain under the hood, and you can apply that to anything you're doing, not only the paid transactions, but anything. So there is a lot happening in that front. There is actually one other side of things that needs to happen for the mass adoption to happen. We were so far talking about the user side of things, and indeed it is obvious to us all as users how much it needs to change, but there's also the builders part. There are, I forget, about 30,000 blockchain developers in the world, something like that. Maybe you can count that 100,000 or something like that, doesn't matter, but there are 33 million software developers in the world. And among them, probably million or a few million game developers. The trick there is to actually unleash the power of blockchain to those people first, who will build the games and applications also and everything else that people will want to use. So there is that a layer of abstraction that needs to happen between the blockchains are very demanding for developers. I know this very well. They require too much from a regular developer to kind of really turn his kind of attention to it and kind of start working on it. The learning curve is pretty steep because it's not only technical, it's mindset as well. But building SDKs that allow people to develop applications, games in particular, on any language they currently use is a huge step forward in kind of reaching out from tens of thousands to millions of developers, and that is happening. Okay, that's something that not only us but many blockchains are doing. The EVM chains are tough for that because of the way Solidity is set up, but many other chains are doing it, and that is one of the key areas, in my view at least, of getting mass adoption, because you can't get the mass adoption with CryptoKitties and simple games. You need really a lot of creativity on the developer side.
I was just going to add something just around this whole debate about mass adoption. It's our sort of belief that we as game developers in Web3 have to be really confident that we're going to make amazing games. And the Web3 element and connecting wallets and all that stuff should be a secondary thing. Certainly with what we're building with Resurgence, people will be able to play that game for free forever. And if they don't want to, not connect to wallet. But our belief is that the decentralized nature of Web3 gaming and what you'll be able to do with NFTs will be so attractive that people will come. So I think, I totally agreed with everything Mohammed said. But I think the way as developers we have to approach this is to really think about that frictionless onboarding and not be putting any barriers up to people, and being confident that our games are going to be so much fun that people will just want to play them. And then the Web3 element will become like an amazing added extra to their experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it takes a long time to educate people, both on the developer side, both on the user side. And I think what's really important is to get people using or playing the game and then realizing it is blockchain behind it, and onboard them through that. I think gaming is such a good way to have mass adoption, way better, for example, than DeFi, because most people don't care that much about finance to learn about it. So gamers are increasing every year. Everyone basically in this industry is aware of the technology, but it takes time for everyone to learn about the technology, to understand how it works, to see other case studies from innovators in the industry, especially for bigger corporations. Also some legal regulation for them to be confident on building with blockchain. It's quite important for companies. And also, I think public companies also have the pressure of quarterly results, while if they are invested into building this technology from scratch, for example, in their project, it's harder for them than a smaller startup try it out in a private way, and then when the time comes, they will use that add-ons to their games. But I think it's right now is such an important time for everyone in the GameFi industry to develop themselves and onboard more people, educate people. And it really is, as Mohammed said, people don't care what they are using in a way. They just want the user experience. It's the same as when we use, for example, our credit card. Most people don't know exactly how it works. It's just convenient. Same with Apple Pay now. And when it's convenient, people will adopt it. And I think blockchain will be convenient in the future. And as someone said, their mom playing Candy Crush, she won't know it's blockchain behind it, but it will make sense as a user. And from there, curiosity is such a big factor. People will start understanding, if I was playing a game and NFTs were inside the game and I was into the game, I would do my research, because it's just a natural path for people when they care and when they are into the game. And yesterday I saw a stat that is quite interesting. People are spending roughly almost 8 hours a day, 7-something hours a day on the internet. So that's basically half of their day if you take off sleeping. So it's getting more important, this digital identity. The games will play a big part, and also with the adoption of the metaverse, gaming is such a big component of that. So the onboarding will happen, and I think that's the biggest use case for blockchain right now.
I think
there's a lot of talk around Candy Crush. I just want to make a random note that we do work with Manel Sorts, who led King Games during the development period of Candy Crush. I think he was there for 7 years. And, he's come out and he's trying to build a Web3 ecosystem, a Web3 game. So it's interesting to see all these successful Web2 games trying to tackle the space. And as awesome as Candy Crush was, and as epic as how much money they made, I just want to also highlight very early on. I mentioned that some of the game developers have told me that their kids have asked them for money to buy NFTs. These kids know what an NFT is to the point where they want to buy it. I don't know if they know how to create a wallet. It will definitely be useful if wallets were easier to use and easier to keep secure. But as a child, if you grow up understanding Web3, look how far the reach has gone. And with our scholars, many of them are very young. They're 20, 21 years old, 17, 18. And we grew so big because a lot of these kids, through network effect, they told their family, they told their friends about the opportunities in Web3, about how to onboard them into the technology. Many of them taught their own parents how to play the game, and their parents are in their 40s and 50s. So it's great to understand that Candy Crush was quite epic. It came to rise during our time in prominence. But in future, what's going to be the next crazy thing that cataclysms the whole Web3 industry? Well, what type of games will be super exciting for the new generations that come on board? And these guys, might grow up wanting to be web game developers as well, or have their own NFT collections. So I think these are very interesting thoughts. Sorry about that.
I think that's just one point. I think the younger generation is way more keen, and they are aware. If you open TikTok, they speak about crypto, they speak about NFTs, and it's their first investment in a way. Teenagers, for example, don't have access to the stock market. Some of them don't even have bank accounts or something, and they can easily have a Web3 wallet and buy tokens, buy NFTs, and I think that's quite important for the onboarding. And if there's, for example, this example, LVMH from Louis Vuitton. The sons of Bernard Arnault, the CEO, are 20 something, and they are into NFTs, and that's probably why we saw Tiffany dropping an NFT. Is because they like the technology and they push that technology into the companies, and that will happen shortly, especially with the new wealth transfer that will happen shortly from the boomer generation to the Gen Z, or the millennials. Sorry, we will see a lot of companies leading more towards this technology because they are active users more than the older ones.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, John, I'll let you go.
Yeah, the point I was going to make, I think as a cultural shift, it's really interesting. But I think when you build mobile games, you with your game design team, it's all about FTUE, right? That first time user experience. And I still think that's a massive challenge when people people keep talking about mass onboarding Web2 players. I was working on one project, and this was with scholars, right? And Brendan, I'm sure you've heard this before. It was built on Polygon, and one of the biggest complaints from scholars was just having to bridge Matic, bridge the ETH mainnet, and sign up, and people almost gave up minting our NFTs. So I think we need to figure out a much better onboarding experience for Web2 players, and definitely that is around the NFT purchasing. It's about the kind of wallet experience and how that connects to the game in the App Store. I think as well as creating amazing content, this onboarding experience also needs a lot of work and thinking as well, and how you're going to motivate a mobile gamer that's enjoying their mobile game, within that mobile game, and that's where these billions of players are right now, right? If you look at the top 4 blockchain games, I think you've got a DAU of around 1 million, versus take the top 4 mobile games and look at their DAU and it's significantly higher. But I think that there's a lot of work and testing needs to be done on this, on the technical side, but also with your game design brain in to try and trigger people move from Web 2 to Web 3. And I'm seeing a lot of big investments from VCs now into GameFi infrastructure, because you go to these conferences and people keep talking about onboarding these Web 2 masses, but it's not as simple as just building the content, right? You need the infrastructure and the techniques to enable them to do that seamlessly. So I think I'm excited to see a lot of investment and innovation in this infrastructure pace, as sort of unsexy as it is, versus making an amazing game. I still think there's a lot of work for us to do there. And I think the second point is, personal opinion, I'm not sure there's a nice synergy between game design and game economy and tokenomics. For me, tokenomics is a mechanism to extract value from cryptocurrency, right? Trading. And I think that's where in the first wave of GameFi, we've seen a lot of games crash because, effectively you've had sort of fintech people thinking they're doing game design, but actually, creating tokenomics, a vehicle to extract value from a game. And I think that's where a lot of interesting conversations are starting to happen, is how can we better, how can we better fit together like traditional game design with tokenomics. So I'm also excited to see some innovation in that space to bring those two pieces closer together.
That's why I love what Animoca is doing, Mohammed, with Phantom Galaxy. They were the most intriguing tokenomics design I've seen. But I've seen other people now come into the space and vary their tokenomics design and their NFT designs, because they're starting to be aware that, a lot of these tokenomics, the tokens that they end up being extractionary for the game. I also want to say, when we think back about everything that's been achieved till now, look at what made Axie really that great I thought was actually the bridge between the Ronin wallet and Binance, and that gave them access to huge amounts of retail users. It made off-ramp, on-ramp much easier. It reduced a whole lot of friction. So as you were saying, in order for us to build out a better space, many different parties have to work together to kind of synergize, and it's going to take time. But exchanges play a very critical role in this. They're basically the gatekeepers of everyone in Web 2 coming into Web 3. And what regulates the exchanges? Well, that's all the different government authorities. So many people have to play, but I think people are interested, but we've yet to find a standardized form that people everywhere kind of accept. And I also want to say that gaming itself is amazing. GameFi is amazing. We're all in GameFi, but it's important to highlight that Web3 cultural movement is huge as well. We're seeing a lot of celebrity endorsement, both in the West and the East, and celebrities, influence huge cultures, heaps of followings that are young, new generations. Like, it's not just GameFi itself that's kind of like pushing all of this forward. It's literally everything that happens in our lives these days.
Hey, Brendan, one thing, do you think for like Web 2 that it's actually Apple and Google that are the massive gatekeepers to mass onboarding versus the exchanges? Because I think they're a big part of this puzzle that we're trying to solve.
Well, look, I can't say too much about that, but I think the exchanges are a bit more incentivized to solve this than, say, Apple or Google. I mean, there's a lot of noise and over Aptos launching their mainnet and all that. I'm sure you guys have heard. But part of what makes Web3 so great is so the content creators and the developers in blockchain actually have a chance at creating something, as opposed to being controlled by all of these large companies that you mentioned in Web2.
Yeah, it's totally fair. I think that's, you and I spoke about this at Consensus. I think this is something that we also need to help on the blockchain gaming side is the distribution model, because obviously the guilds have been amazing there in the first phase, but trying to get the guilds and get access to, instead of hundreds of thousands to millions and billions. And to your point, that is where there is a slight stranglehold at the moment when it comes to Web 2. You have these two giant, wall gardens that, at the moment are making it very difficult, where you have to create almost like this, in-game off-chain experience, and then a separate, desktop browser-based on-chain experience that I think also is part of the challenge. But, they are softening slightly, and things are getting a little easier. We've got some cool stuff live on Google Play at the moment, and just working with Apple on getting the iOS stuff live. So it's starting to move. But my point was also more about just trying to support blockchain games with even bigger distribution.
Definitely. And as a guild, don't be too focused on what we did do last year, but the final end goal is to make it easier for users to adopt this technology. Our scholars originally were from Philippines and Indonesia, but that's just because those areas benefited the most from what was available. But as the space develops, we expect to hire more scholars from everywhere else. Our job is actually to onboard these guys and make it more frictionless. We're here to hold your hand, educate you, because we know understanding this is very difficult. We also don't just work with games, we work with a lot of infrastructures, and we speak to marketplaces as well. In the end of the day, I think, like I mentioned earlier, everyone needs to be working together, sharing that information to build a better future.
I think one of the biggest challenges, just coming back to, the ideas around tokenomics, and obviously more importantly the lessons that have been learnt, particularly over the last 2 years, in light of the sheer volume of Ponzi schemes that obviously primarily the crypto space saw. And I think obviously Axie was a part of that whole process.
Cultural shift is really interesting, but I think when you build mobile games, you with your game design team, it's all about FTUE, right? That first time user experience. And I still think that's a massive challenge when people keep talking about mass onboarding Web2 players. like I was working on one project, and this was with scholars, right? And Brendan, I'm sure you've heard this before. Like, it was built on Polygon, and one of the biggest complaints from scholars was just having to bridge, like Matic, bridge the ETH mainnet, and sign up, and people almost gave up minting our NFTs. So I think we need to figure out a much better onboarding experience for Web2 players, and definitely that is around the NFT purchasing. It's about the kind of wallet experience and how that connects to the game in the App Store. I think as well as creating amazing content, this onboarding experience also needs a lot of work and thinking as well, and how you're going to motivate a mobile gamer that's enjoying their mobile game, like within that mobile game, and that's where these billions of players are right now, right? If you look at the top 4 blockchain games, I think you've got a DAU of around 1 million, versus take the top 4 mobile games and look at their DAU and it's significantly higher. But I think that there's a lot of work and testing needs to be done on this, you know, on the technical side, but also with your game design brain in, to try and trigger people move from Web 2 to Web 3. And I'm seeing a lot of big investments from VCs now into GameFi infrastructure, because you go to these conferences and people keep talking about onboarding these Web 2 masses, but it's not as simple as just building the content, right? You need the infrastructure and the techniques to enable them to do that seamlessly. So I think I'm excited to see a lot of investment innovation in this infrastructure pace, as sort of unsexy as it is, versus making an amazing game. I still think there's a lot of work for us to do there. And I think the second point is, you know, like personal opinion, I'm not sure there's a nice synergy between game design and game economy and tokenomics. For me, tokenomics is a mechanism to extract value from, like, cryptocurrency, right? Trading. And I think that's where in the first wave of GameFi, we've seen a lot of games crash, because, you know, effectively you've had sort of fintech people thinking they're doing game design, but actually, you know, creating tokenomics a vehicle to extract value from a game. And I think that's where a lot of interesting conversations are starting to happen, is how can we better, you know, how can we better fit together like traditional game design with tokenomics? So I'm also excited to see some innovation in that space to bring those two pieces closer together.
That's why I love what Animoca is doing, Mohammed, with Phantom Galaxy. You know, they were the most intriguing tokenomics design I've seen. But I've seen other people now come into the space and vary their tokenomics design and their NFT designs, because they're starting to be aware that, you know, a lot of these tokenomics, the tokens that they end up being extractionary for the game. I also want to say, when we think back about everything that's been achieved till now, look at what made Axie really that great I thought was actually the bridge between the Ronin wallet and Binance, and that gave them access to huge amounts of retail users. It made off-ramp, on-ramp much easier. It reduced a whole lot of friction. So as you were saying, in order for us to build out a better space, many different parties have to work together to kind of synergize, and it's going to take time. But exchanges play a very critical role in this. They're basically the gatekeepers of everyone in Web 2 coming into Web 3. And what regulates the exchanges? Well, you know, that's all the different government authorities. So many people have to play, but I think people are interested, but we've yet to find a standardized form that people everywhere kind of accept. And I also want to say that gaming itself is amazing. GameFi is amazing. We're all in GameFi, but it's important to highlight that Web3 cultural movement is huge as well. We're seeing a lot of celebrity endorsement, both in the West and the East, and celebrities, you know, influence huge cultures, heaps of followings that are young, new generations. Like, it's not just GameFi itself that's kind of like pushing all of this forward. It's literally everything that happens in our lives these days.
Hey Brendan, one thing, do you think for like Web 2 that it's actually Apple and Google that are the massive gatekeepers to mass onboarding versus the exchanges? Because I think they're a big part of this puzzle that we're trying to solve.
Well, look, I can't say too much about that, but I think the exchanges are a bit more incentivized to solve this than, say, Apple or Google. I mean, there's a lot of noise and over Aptos launching their mainnet and all that. I'm sure you guys have heard. But you know, part of what makes Web3 so great is so the content creators and the developers in blockchain actually have a chance at creating something, as opposed to being controlled by all of these large companies that you mentioned in Web2.
Yeah, it's totally fair. I think that's, you know, you and I spoke about this at Consensus. I think this is something that we also need to help on the blockchain gaming side is the distribution model, because obviously the guilds have been amazing there in the first phase, but trying to get the guilds and get access to, you know, instead of hundreds of thousands to, like, you know, millions and billions. And to your point, that that is where there is a slight stranglehold at the moment when it comes to Web 2. You know, you have these two giant, you know, wall gardens that, you know, at the moment are making it very difficult, where you have to create almost like this, you know, in-game off-chain experience and then a separate, you know, desktop browser-based on-chain experience that I think also is part of the challenge. But, you know, they are softening slightly and things are getting a little easier. Like, you know, we've got some cool stuff live on Google Play at the moment and just working with Apple on getting the iOS stuff live. So it's starting to move. But yeah, my point was also more about just trying to like support blockchain games with even bigger distribution.
No, definitely. And as a guild, like, don't be too focused on what we did do last year, but the final end goal is to make it easier for users to adopt this technology. Our scholars originally were from Philippines and Indonesia, but that's just because those areas benefited the most from what was available. But as the space develops, we expect to hire more scholars from everywhere else. Our job is actually to onboard these guys and make it more frictionless. We're here to hold your hand, educate you, because we know understanding this is very difficult. We also don't just work with games, we work with a lot of infrastructures, and we speak to marketplaces as well. In the end of the day, I think, like I mentioned earlier, everyone needs to be working together, sharing that information to build a better future.
I think one of the biggest challenges, just coming back to, you know, the ideas around tokenomics, and obviously more importantly the lessons that have been learnt, particularly over the last 2 years, in light of, you know, the sheer volume of Ponzi schemes that, you know, obviously primarily the crypto space saw. And I think obviously, you know, Axie was a part of that whole process. Sure, there were obviously a lot of positives that came out of Axie and the potential that obviously GameFi presents us, but the real challenge, you know, beyond just the NFT aspect of the game and ownership of the game in terms of the asset itself, but the tokenomics, I think that for us, you know, at Blockmates, what do? We essentially teach, you know, like crypto, and we make the whole process, you know, as frictionless as possible. So we're in the business of educating, because there is just so much complicated and so many layers to what it is that we're doing in this space. And I think tokenomics are important because there's an opportunity for you guys as game developers to obviously remove the Ponzi aspect of this thing and to incentivize players in, you know, whether it's in a real yield perspective, because obviously that seems to be the, you know, kind of like the buzzword that's circulating at the moment, but something that's sustainable, something that's going to land up, you know, not only lasting for 6 months, but for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and, you know, creating that positive feedback loop that's needed for those communities to thrive, for the economy to thrive, and, you know, for you guys to continue developing and obviously, you know, making good products.
And I think on the tokenomics as well, it's what we've seen. I guess what we've all seen in the way the market keeps changing and evolving. And we keep saying we're early, and we are early, but that also means a lot of the Web3 tooling we're using is quite nascent as well. And I think some of the downfalls for previous games and some of the learnings we've seen is if you try to design a complete tokenomics, there tends to be a lot of short term. It's excellent because you're riding that current market wave, but once the market conditions change, the narrative changes, there's new Web3 tooling coming out. What tends to happen is things become redundant, or there's a new hype and people move on to whatever that new hype is. So something that we try and do when we're designing this is we try and build a very, very solid foundation, and also know that what we're building is stage one, and we want to try and build it as close to the finished article, but we don't actually know what that endpoint looks like because we don't know what the tooling's going to look like 6 months from now, a year from now. We don't know how people are going to be engaging. I mean, it's I think the hype now is what free mints, and before it was paid mints, and prior to that, people weren't even worried about NFTs. And I'm going a couple of years back, and it was all the different airdrop mechanics, and it's people are farming, and it's a big issue. And because of incentive mechanics as well, and our view on incentive mechanics, a big assumption is money incentivizes everyone, and to a certain degree it does. But what that then brought is a large amount of speculators into the ecosystem where it's back to this farming. What can I do to be eligible for an airdrop? Or there's a lot of hype around this project. Let me buy a few of these NFTs and flip them once it's hit my target, and so on and so forth. And that's a big challenge within the space. And it does come down to tokenomics fundamentally. And I think another big challenge we have in the space is when we're using words like tokenomics, like metaverse, like, again, NFTs, it's like, what do we actually mean? Because an NFT can be so many different things. It could be a PFP, it could be an in-game asset, it could be a ticket, it could give you access access to or token gated access to a DAO or to a community. And we're still discovering so many more functionalities for NFTs. So I think we have to be careful as well as a space when we're using these buzzwords to actually define what we mean by NFT, by tokenomics, by metaverse, because it's some of these words have different meanings to us, and when used in specific contexts, the person listening then gets a completely different idea of what's being sold based on their understanding of one of these buzzwords.
Completely agree, Mohammed. Like as a WoW user since the old days, like even a Discord is a metaverse of its own. World of Warcraft was a metaverse. Metaverses aren't new. It's just with the introduction of new technologies, it just allows us to engage more with the community, and that kind of builds upon the use case of these buzzwords, metaverses and stuff. I don't think a lot of the games actually aim to build so-called Ponzonomic tokenomics, but they're just trying to figure it out at the same time. Being first to market, sometimes these are very difficult problems to tackle. We've seen games suffer because they have a lack of users, and we've seen games also suffer because they all of a sudden next day they have too many users. I think it's important for game design to implement more levers that allows them to control the influx of users, especially in times where we're trying to kind of navigate the space properly and understand how to build sustainable tokenomics. And definitely the use cases of NFTs can be improved, as well as the reference to these terminologies being thrown around a bit too often under very different circumstances can confuse people.
Yeah, completely agree on that front. I think so. Ponzonomics is quite interesting, and it's. I think when we think of adoption, we tend to think adoption is linear. Adoption is never linear. So what we see is essentially that exponential growth quite early on, especially when there's a lot of hype around the project. But with exponential growth, you have people who've gotten in early, and then they're naturally going to want to sell because you bought something for $100 and now it's worth $1,000. So it's a bit like, well, that's real money. That's money on the table. So I'm going to sell. And while that's helped seed a lot of communities, it's, how can I say it? It's more of a short-term impact, and we're all learning, and there's loads of learnings to be had. You just need to look around to see what works, what doesn't work, what did work and now doesn't work anymore because of different market conditions, all the different variables that have to be taken into account. But then the other side of it as well is, if we're starting by selling an asset for someone to gain access into an ecosystem, is that the right way to go about? Maybe it's a form of raising funds, but the other side of it, and a lot of advice we're giving, is if you don't need to raise funds, then is it worth actually doing a token sale, with that token being either a fungible token or a non-fungible token? Because instantly you've already created a divide within that community that anyone who comes in early is going to have a big reward. And it's great to reward early users, but a big issue we're seeing is that early users are over rewarded. And when we use things like staking, it's your lock up your tokens for a period of time, we'll give you even more tokens. That doesn't work, because again, it's your over rewarding early users, and what tends to happen is you have a small community who have a large say in what happens in that ecosystem purely because they own the majority of the assets for that, be it GameFi, be it DeFi, be it any other type of Fi or protocol in that instance. So it's, I don't know, we're seeing interesting mechanisms. I think Delphi penned in lock and drop as an airdrop mechanic where you're entitled to these tokens, and then essentially that can be extended to NFTs as well, but you then have to earn them. So you earn the right to get access to these. And I think it sounds counterintuitive, why would I have to earn the right twice? But we're seeing a lot of people, when they earn the right the first time, they're still speculators, or the majority of them are still speculators. So I then need to earn the right a second time by showing I'm going to be a good actor within that ecosystem. So these are some of the things that we're deep diving into and trying to see how can we incentivize people to come into the ecosystem. But the incentive isn't money, because there are other things that incentivize us. Like, why do we go to work out? We work out because we want to feel better about ourselves. We want to lose weight. We want to get ripped. We want to get defined. We want to be healthier. These are all reasons, or these are all incentives of why someone wants to work out, or in inverted commas, they want to move to earn. But it's the to earn part is actually, or should I take that back, they don't want to move to earn. They want to move to get fit in that instance. And it would be excellent if they can earn. But again, when we say earnings, what is the earnings we're talking about? Is it just more tokens? Or can it be, from a game perspective, in-game assets that I'm earning? Or maybe from a move to earn or move and earn perspective, I get, I don't know, a one-day gym pass, or I get a weekly call scheduled with a nutritionist, because that's more of an incentive for me to want to come into an ecosystem, as opposed to just I get to earn And then eventually what we've seen, especially with Steppen, for example, probably the most hyped one recently, is it's not sustainable. You can't give out 70 to $100 for someone logging into an app for 10 minutes, essentially hacking by shaking the phone, and then they just go for a drive and they've earned $100 in 10 minutes. Obviously that was prior to the UST crash, when GMT was still quite high. But and actually I think on Steppen, that was a great example, because we see a lot of projects gain this mass adoption. They get not mass adoption, so they get this exponential growth. There's a lot of hype around the project. But what comes next is a massive drop in the token price. And I'm yet to see a project have that exponential growth and then pivot and be like, all right, now we're going to make some changes because we can't sustain this. But the issue with that is all of the actors you've brought in have been speculators. And then projects die. We saw it with DeFi when a couple of years back, when we were giving out crazy rewards. And it happens for about a month, 6 weeks. The TVL of that platform goes through the roof, and then it dies. We saw it with GameFi as well, and it's just like, what are we going to do that's different? Because the learning is there to be had, but are we actually looking into the past to see what's worked, to see what hasn't worked, and also what's the outlook? Is it a short-term outlook? Is it a medium-term outlook? Is it a long-term outlook? What's going to take precedent? Because more often than not, is a lot of projects want the immediate success, but that then burns them in the medium to long term. And I think there is a fine balance to be struck.
Isn't it interesting how on one end we've highlighted how important it is to reduce friction to allow mass consumers come into the space, and on the other part, because to manage the tokenomics, we've had to increase friction in a way for things to make sense. Look, I don't know how to solve that problem. It's a very tough problem to solve, but it's definitely a problem that exists right now. One thing I do want to point out, though, is games should decide how to raise money and what the function of the NFTs or tokens do, and don't raise if you don't really need to. But at the same time, as a user, if I went on Steam and I bought $30 and I spent $30 to buy a game to play, if I play it for 1 hour and I don't like it, I'm not really that upset. But if I'm buying NFTs for say $1,000 to get access to a game that promises me the world, and then when I play it, it's not the world, then I'll be extremely disappointed. So I do believe that if you look at NFTs as an asset, not by like SEC standards, but like from your own personal perspective, like a Pokemon card. I really like this card. It has an innate value to me. It looks like a Pokemon that looks like my dog or something, right? That holds true to a value in my heart. And someone else out there might have, might really like that card as well. And then the community are the people that actually set the value of how much these NFTs actually cost. I think that makes a lot more reasonable sense. Game developers, when they create games, and this is purely my own opinion, they should consider the accessible level for the consumer to come in. How much would they have to spend to actually come in and play your game? Perhaps the answer is it's free to play, and perhaps the answer is when they convert to become a NFT paying user, you guys should consider releasing different NFTs like they do in Web2 that coincide with a lot of different IPs of different communities to try and integrate those fans to come into the space, but have it be at more affordable prices as per thousands of dollars where the expectation is a bit different.
Yeah, guys, I'm just going to jump in real quick. That has been an absolute amazing space. I think we've covered a lot of very big, important topics that are still very much open-ended. But from the outset, Web3 does have a place in gaming. Web3 will potentially be the thing that manages to onboard the masses into the ecosystem. And we still definitely do need to sort out tokenomics so they don't seem as scammy and money-grabbing as possible. And if the game company does need a token, don't make it. Just make a really badass game, because there's some seriously badass games out there that don't actually have a token and probably never will. Does anyone have any other concluding words to the space talk? Because this has been an absolute bomb today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love sharing the space with all of these other thinkers. And it's been really wonderful having an audience to share how I feel, and hopefully it's much more positive sharing this, and everyone can do better things.
It's a great pleasure meeting you all. I can't wait to meet you all in person. So that's it in a couple of weeks, right? Looking forward to that, and let's continue these discussions.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, sorry, mate, you go in my head.
No, I was going to say thank you guys for hosting, and looking forward to seeing everyone in a couple of weeks' time as well. And remember that we are in uncharted territory, so we're all learning. We're all on our learning journeys into Web3. So there's anything you do, even if it's not the right thing to do, it's an opportunity to learn and grow. And I think we need to have the right mindset so this space can continue to grow.
Also, so if anybody wants to PvP myself and Jedi when we get to Zebu Live, just hit us up. We'll be easy to spot. If maybe it's a beverage, or if you've got like a World of Warcraft account, let's go.
So does tequila feature into that?
Oh, most certainly, sir. Most certainly.
Good. All right. Then I'll be there.
Guys, thank you so much. It's been much appreciated. Have a lovely afternoon, and we'll see you at Zebu Live.
See you everyone at Zebu Live.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much to our panelists. It's been an incredible discussion. For those that haven't yet, make sure to join the Telegram group. It's in our bio. Go ahead and click the link. Join the Telegram group. Let's continue the discussions. Introduce yourselves. Say what's up. Post whatever news. Let's get the conversation going. About 2.5 weeks left to the event. A lot still to do, but it's really coming together. Really proud of the team and the people that brought together for this event. And yeah, couldn't be more excited to host everyone. Please do reach out if you have any questions, and we'll make sure to keep everyone updated live here on our Twitter. And we also have another space coming next week, be next Wednesday, 1 p.m. BST. Back here again, we're going to be talking about the future of NFTs. And also to celebrate, we are going to be having our headline sponsor, Dancing Seahorse, which has just been announced through PR. Will be coming live on our Twitter right nice and pretty soon. But yeah, I'm super excited for that announcement. Super excited to have everyone come out and see everything that's going on in the Web3 space, learn, connect, grow, and yeah, we just can't wait. I'm so excited for everyone to be there, playing some PvP games, drinking, hanging out, learning, and yeah, it's going to be awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you back here next week.
Very bullish with Zebu Live. Thanks, everyone.
Let's go, LFG, WAGME, the whole thing. Bye-bye, everyone.